Hello everyone. Welcome to the Audio Storage Channel, a channel specializing in providing the best reading stories today. Wish you a happy day listening to stories. Invite you to listen. In the hot summer afternoon, Han Shan Yu leaned on the mat to rest. I obediently copied the words beside me. Jia Niang quietly knelt down, helping me grind the ink. The cicadas chirped, the shade of the trees was cool, the dappled light swayed, shining on Jia Niang's lowered cheeks. She quietly watched me practice writing, probably remembering my pitiful appearance when I was forced to drink yogurt, so she couldn't help but cover her mouth with her hand and snicker. When Han Shan Yu woke up, he would check my writing. If he was in a good mood, or very satisfied, he would bend down, take the opportunity to hold my hand, and teach me to write poems on paper. The green locust tree and tall willow swallowed the new cicadas, the fragrant wind blew into the strings. Under the green silk window, the smoke of incense, the sound of flags disturbed the afternoon nap. The light rain had just stopped, the small lotus leaves turned, the pomegranate flowers bloomed brilliantly. Slender jade hands played with the clear water, the pearls broke and then rounded again. This was the first poem he taught me. I memorized it in my head, reading it backwards like a pestle. Han Shanyu's words were like flying dragons and dancing phoenixes, with an ethereal demeanor, very pleasing to the eye. He also taught me chess, painting, flower arrangement, and even the zither. Those things were not my forte. I studied very hard, but did not dare to argue back. Occasionally I would whisper, "Learning these things is useless." Han Shanyu raised his eyebrows and looked at me, the corner of his mouth holding a faint smile. "In your opinion, what is useful to learn?" I observed his expression, and could not help but say, "These things are all things used to entertain oneself in one's free time. Knowing them is fine, not knowing them is fine. Why does Han Jun insist on making you learn them?" "It is precisely because they are things used to entertain oneself that I want you to learn them." Han Shan Yu looked at me, his eyes instantly turning cold. "Being trapped at home, you always have to have something to love. Life is long, the more things you use to kill time, the better. Right now you don't need to like it, but at least after you finish school, you won't be so lonely in the future." "But why will you be lonely?" I put on a confused expression, not understanding what he said. His eyes looked at me with a bit of pity. He reached out and patted my head. "One day, you will understand." These words really made me even more confused. I wanted to ask clearly, but he did not explain further. Zhongjung Hall was strictly guarded. Han Shanyu's noble status, although he rarely went out, he did not always have the free time to see me. When he was not here, Jia Niang would occasionally take me out to play. Jia Niang was very skillful. In the spring she would pick flowers and pound them into a paste with a stone mortar. Then use a thin cloth to filter the water. Cut the newly spun silk into the size of a lipstick jar. Soak it completely in perfume, take it out to dry, it would become a high-quality lipstick. In the summer we also used bamboo poles to catch cicadas. Jia Niang made glue and applied it to the tip of the pole. The cicadas rarely escaped good. She also knows how to brew osmanthus wine, using the spring water from Gaoshan Road, along with the old cinnamon trees in the mansion. Every year during the autumn equinox, there is always a guard in the Zhongjung Hall who will personally go get the spring water from the mountain and bring a few jars here. Jia Niang's osmanthus wine is delicious and pure, and is only offered to Han Shanjin. Spring passes, summer comes, my handwriting gradually becomes neat. I can barely play chess with Han Shanyu, and I can also play a complete piece of music. Ah Shin always says that I have grown taller, and need to make a few new clothes. She also says that I have become whiter, a girl with bright eyes and white teeth. I am very happy, looking at the mother-of-pearl inlaid bronze mirror in the room, innocently asking her, "Are you really whiter?" Ah Shin nods, smiling and saying, "You're really whiter." "How whiter?" "Well, I can't say exactly how white it is, but it's white," Ah Shin said, smiling as she combed my hair. She always liked to comb my hair on both sides. After I turned 12, she started to do a Chaoyun bun for me, then put a golden hairpin on the bun. That golden hairpin was very beautiful, and there was a very large pearl inlaid on it. It was a birthday present for me from Han Shanyu. Waking up from my afternoon nap, Ah Shin had already combed my hair. I hurriedly went to look for him. The pavilion and the towers, the lotus leaves in the lake were as green as plates. The lotus flowers were blooming, elegant and beautiful. Under the curtain, Jia Niang was not in the pavilion. Only Han Shanyu was resting his chin on the mat, eyes closed, resting. Suspecting that he had fallen asleep, I carefully knelt in front of the bed, not saying anything. His eyelashes moved slightly, and before he opened his eyes, he called my name, "Abao." Han Shan-yu's voice was still as cold as before, like the cool scent of night jasmine on his body, still tinged with a bit of laziness from the afternoon. I kept nodding. It's me, it's a Bao. He slowly opened his eyes, a smile flashing in the depths of his eyes. What do you want from me? I curved my eyes, not thinking much, and smiled foolishly at him. I miss Han Jun. After waking up, I want to see you. On the low table in front of the bed, there was a bottle of osmanthus wine. Han Shan-yu lowered his eyes, reached out to pour himself a cup of wine. I sat here and mumbled non-stop, started talking to myself about many things, and these things were nothing more than I learned new words that he taught me, and I dreamed during my nap, but when I woke up I forgot them. The last point was, Shin praised me for becoming whiter. I raised my head to look at him, full of anticipation waiting for him to say something. Because I always remembered, that year when I first came to the Han family, he called me, Little Charcoal. Then in Zongjung Hall, he discovered that I didn't like to drink yogurt. He also kindly reminded me, goat's milk although fishy, but can whiten the skin. The 12-year-old little girl had gradually developed a love for beauty. Han Shanyu looked at me with a half-smile, fondling the jade cup in her hand. The corner of her mouth curved into a beautiful curve. A Bao really became whiter. Just the phrase, turned whiter, was enough to make my heart sweet. Happily walked forward, smiled and talked, pouring wine for him. Zhang Niang's osmanthus wine smells so fragrant. I've never drunk it before, always curious about its taste. Now that I have the chance, I ask Han Shan-yu. He tilted his head to look at me, his eyebrows slightly raised. Want to try? I solemnly nodded, looking at him expectantly. He only hesitated a little, reached out his hand, and handed me a cup. The wine in the jade cup was amber, with a fragrant osmanthus scent. I first carefully took a small sip, swallowed it, and then said in surprise, it's bitter, but it's very fragrant, and a little sweet, better than yogurt. Han Shan-yu's eyes had a smile. I raised my head, drank the remaining osmanthus wine in one gulp, my eyebrows furrowed and then relaxed, then pushed the empty cup towards him with an unsatisfied expression, an expectant expression. Han Shan-yu's hand covered the empty cup, and said, no. Not letting me drink anymore, he himself was leisurely and comfortable, leaning on the mat, enjoying the wine in the cup. My eyes stared at the jade cup in his brother's hand, and couldn't help but say, Han Jun, I'm an adult, not a child anymore. Can I drink a little more? Han Shan-yu glanced at me, not paying attention. I said it wrong just now. Zhang Niang's osmanthus wine is just normal. I don't find it delicious, unless you let me taste it another sip. Han Shan-yu. HMPH. I'll only taste it once, please. Han Shan-yu. No. Oh, why did the lotus leaf grow into the pavilion, and even move? How strange. Han Shan-yu. It was my first time experiencing the feeling of being drunk. I only felt dizzy all over. Han Shan-yu's eyes also became blurry. In my days, I seemed to hear him sigh. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I was already lying on the bed in Hufeng Hall. Hufeng Hall was a study in Zongjung Hall, and it was also where Han Shanyu often stayed. If he was busy until late at night, he would occasionally sleep here. There was only a small lamp lit in the room. The light was very dim, the bed curtains were pulled up, outside the window it was already late at night, and there was also the sound of rain falling. This was the second time I slept here. The last time was when I was 10 years old, also on an afternoon like this. Han Shanyu was talking with someone else. I was in the hall practicing calligraphy. I wrote and then fell asleep directly on the table. When I woke up, I was already lying on the bed. It was already dark outside. Jianyang had already changed my pajamas for me, and had even untied my hair. After that, Ah Shin told me that she had originally planned to come pick me up that day, but Han Shanjin said I was already asleep, there was no need to bother me. When I slept on his bed, at night he would sleep in the inner room, separated from me by a long screen. Han Shanyu had never liked having too many servants. Beside him there was only Zhang Niang. When I woke up from my drunkenness, I was alone in the room. Barefoot on the ground, I walked around the long screen, and went to look for Han Shanyu. He was indeed sleeping on the bed in the small bedroom. It was not yet autumn yet, but he had already put on a thick silk inner shirt and covered himself with a thin brocade blanket. I knew that he had always been afraid of the cold. Spring passed and summer came. The weather changed, but his hands were always cold. At this moment his hands were placed on the thin blanket. They were very beautiful hands, 10 slender fingers, white as cold jade. The small candle flickered, passing through the bronze lampshade, dimly illuminating Han Shanyu's face. He lay still, his long eyelashes drooping, sleeping very peacefully. I smelled a spicy scent wafting throughout the room, mixed with a faint scent of medicine. He looked like he wasn't in good health. His face was always pale and bloodless, but it seemed like I had never seen him take medicine before. At this moment, the candlelight was flickering. He was lying there quietly. I rubbed my eyes and called out to him, "Han Jun." He didn't wake up. The night was quiet. Perhaps it was too inappropriate. I was a little scared. I unconsciously moved forward, lay face down on the bed, and pressed my ear against his body. Under the thin blanket, when I vaguely heard the sound of a heartbeat, a hand reached up and gently placed it on my face. The palm of the hand was a bit cold, and the thumb was gently massaging my cheek. I raised my head, just in time to meet Han Chu's eyes, and Yu opened his eyes. His eyes were full of teasing, half smiling and half not saying. I heard, "Little fool." Han Shan Yu touched my face, asking if I was hungry. I nodded, but at the same time looked out the window, saying, "It's too late, I can wait until tomorrow morning to have breakfast." He smiled and said, "It's okay, there are people on duty outside, afraid that you will be hungry when you wake up. The stove is always simmering soup at night, just let them bring it." At the hour of the ox, Wei Feng Yin lit the long-lasting lamp. The whole room was bright. The maid on duty quickly brought the food. It was stewed pigeon with white poria and 2 snacks I liked. As soon as the lid of the pot of soup was opened, the aroma filled the room. After eating and drinking, I was no longer sleepy. Seeing that it was raining outside, I asked Han Shan Yu if I could sit under the eaves for a while. Except when teaching me to read and write, he was strict. Han Shan Nok usually treats me very indulgently, with a bit of childishness. He is afraid of the cold, so when sitting under the eaves watching the rain, not only does he put on an extra coat, the guards also bring a charcoal stove. At night, a row of lanterns are hung up, illuminating the entire yard. The sound of rain falling, the raindrops like pearls sliding down from the roof, pattering on the banana leaves in the yard. I feel like being naughty, and ask him if I can go out and play in the water. Han Shan Yu agrees, so I roll up my pants, happily run out to hug the house pillar, stick my feet out of the eaves, and step on the puddle on the ground. The rain falls with the wind, cool and pleasant, very comfortable. Later, when I got bored of playing, I saw him sitting by the charcoal stove peeling lychees. I immediately ran over and sat down, propping my chin on my hand to watch him peel lychees. Han Shanyu's slender and white hands peeled the whole lychee, round and juicy like a pearl. My eyes stared, not moving. He curled his lips. "Recite a poem about lychee, I will give it to you." I frowned, racking my brain, and finally remembered a poem he had taught me. Under Lafu Mountain, 4 springs, tangerines and apricots are new one after another. Eat 300 lychees a day, and you will not refuse to be a Gaoshan person. I couldn't read it fluently, but I still finished stuttering. Han Shanyu reluctantly satisfied, and gave me the peeled lychee. Wanting to eat the second one, he asked me to recite a poem about rain. I pouted. Eating lychee is such a fun thing, why do I have to recite a poem? Don't want to read? Han Shanyu raised his eyebrows at me, and put the lychee that he had intended to give me into his mouth. Even the way he ate was so elegant, slow and leisurely, and he didn't forget to wipe his hands with a handkerchief. It seemed like he didn't intend to peel anymore. I was a little impatient, standing straight in front of him, and said seriously, "I just remembered a poem, it would be most appropriate to read it to Han Jun." "Oh, try reading it." He looked at me with interest. I cleared my throat, and our eyes met. The wind and rain were gloomy. The rooster crowed loudly. Having met him, why wasn't my heart at peace? The wind and rain were pounding. The rooster crowed shrilly. Having met him, why wasn't my heart at peace? The wind and rain were hazy. The rooster crowed incessantly. Having met him, why wasn't my heart happy? The rain fell on the banana leaves in the yard. The wind blew and shook the lanterns under the eaves, shining on Han Shanyu's perfect face. The corners of his mouth were still smiling, but his voice was very calm. "I never taught you these things. Han Jun taught me to read and write, and told me to read a lot of books. I learned this myself," I said with a proud expression. Ah Shin said that when I reach the age of marriage, I can marry Han Jun. I like Han Jun very much. I really hope to marry you soon. At the age of 7, I entered the mansion. I didn't understand much about my adopted wife since I was a child. I only knew that the young man had a beautiful appearance, which made me look at him in a daze. After the age of 8, I grew up beside him. He said that he was my future fiancé, not my elder. I asked Ah Shin what husband meant. Ah Shin said that it meant someone who would be together for life, living under the same blanket, and dying in the same grave. I asked Ah Shin again, "Do you have a husband?" Shin said. Miss Baoer, I do, but my husband died early. I'm currently a servant in the Han mansion. When I'm old and can't do it anymore, I'll go back and be buried with him. In this world, meeting and parting is not up to us, being together is already difficult. This is the principle that Shin told me, and it is also the principle that I have realized since I was young. I am destined to be with Han Shan Yu forever, and after death, we will be buried in the same grave. Then I will protect you, cherish you, and never leave you. That was the first time I told him my feelings, but he only patted my head, his expression calm. It's too late, be good, go to sleep. The 13th day of the first lunar month is the day of the great sea sacrifice ceremony of the fishermen of Gao Shan Dao. As the head of the Han family, every year at this time, Han Shan Yu will personally go to the largest pearl field in Qingsha Temple. Qingsha Temple is located in the south of Zuya Sea, and it takes 2 days by boat to get there. The day of departure is also the day of the biggest uprising of the year for the Han family. 10 large ships, with a crew of more than 8,000 people, moved on the sea, protecting the harbor. IGU in the middle. IGU is the most magical boat I have ever seen. In the midst of strong winds and waves, it never tilted, moving smoothly all the way. The cabin has walls made of buffalo hide, with half-man-high walls, and loopholes that can be used for attacks. The place where Han Shan Yu lives is always strictly guarded and careful. This is the first time I have followed him to the Pearl Beach in Qingsha Temple. Before, he always said that on the island there are strong winds and waves, the sea sacrifice is not beautiful, I am still young, not suitable for that kind of situation. Almost every year, he refused to take me. Until I was 12 years old, pitifully begging him for a long time, he finally agreed. I have never been on such a tall and majestic boat, and have never seen a huge fleet of boats moving together. Everywhere I look is new. When I have free time I run up to the deck to admire the scenery. Han Shanyu rarely went out of the cabin. In January, the sea was windy and really cold. I stood on the deck and felt cold, so I returned to the cabin and drank some hot tea that Zhang Niang made. Han Shanyu still looked cold and distant. He was in the cabin with a charcoal stove, wearing a fox fur coat, holding a book. Without looking up he warned. Don't run around, be careful not to fall into the sea. I raised my head and smiled smugly at him. You can't fall into the sea, I know how to swim. The next moment, the book in his hand knocked on my head. You still dare to argue, even if you know how to swim, it's hard to survive without someone saving you. I was hit by him, just about to tell him that I wouldn't drown, but in the end I still couldn't say it, just annoyedly replied. Oh, I know. Zhang Niang stood beside me and smiled, pouring more hot tea into my cup. Han Shan Yu raised his head to look at me, unconsciously curling the corners of his mouth. Go practice calligraphy. Oh my God, even on the boat, he didn't forget to supervise me practicing calligraphy. I helplessly sighed. I originally thought that the sea sacrifice ceremony was like as fishermen setting up offerings, kowtowing to the ocean, and that was it. I didn't expect that the sea sacrifice ceremony at Qingsha Temple would be held on a large ship out at sea, so heart-stirring. The fourth master Han, who hadn't seen him for several years, also brought along many guards to be there. From the fishermen on the island to the pearl divers, almost everyone was present. The sound of drums resounded, worshipping the sea god. First of all, incense must be lit, paper must be burned, called practicing writing. After practicing writing, one must pay respects to the dead, cruelly pushing living animals into the sea, watching them be swept away by the waves to the bottom of the sea. I finally understood why Han Shanyu said the sea sacrifice scene was not suitable for children. The cries of those cows, buffaloes, goats, and sheep, in an instant, even drowned out the sound of the drums, extremely tragic. Zhang Niang quickly covered my eyes with her hands. She was like Han Shanyu, always treating me like a child, instinctively wanting to shelter and protect me. Although I was terrified, I was not too afraid, because I had heard my father and clansmen tell me that in the past, in Gao Shan Dao, every time there was a sea sacrifice, people would often use living people to be sacrificed. Moreover, most of the people who were sacrificed were slaves from the Dan people. Now, using animals to sacrifice ghosts instead of living people, it was like opening a way for us to live. The final step of the sea sacrifice ceremony at Qingsha Temple was to build the Taiping Fang. The so-called Taiping Fang was a heavy coffin board. People called it Taiping, with the hope that every fisherman who went out to sea could return safely, and have a beautiful grave as their final resting place. After everything was over, Han Shanyu would lead everyone towards the sea to pay their respects. Wherever the head of the Han family went, he was strictly protected, and the scene was guarded by the fourth Master Han himself, and there had never been any incidents before. However, on the way back that day, a commotion suddenly broke out in the crowd, mixed with curses and loud screams, as if someone was fighting. Everyone's attention was attracted. A fisherman standing nearby suddenly took advantage of the guards' lack of vigilance, and pulled out a long sword and charged towards Han Shanyu. The incident happened so quickly, and the other person seemed to know martial arts. Han Tran was the first to react, and I, because I was standing closest to Han Sun Nok, was so scared that I screamed and instinctively blocked in front of him. A desperate call rang out in my ears, a bow. At that moment, I felt like I had just crossed the thin line between life and death. I widened my eyes, seeing that guy swinging his saber and charging towards me, the sharp blade just inches from my head. Then, his blood splattered onto my face. Standing behind him was Han Tran with a face full of anger. The scene was quickly controlled, the three assassins were captured alive, and brought to kneel before Han Sun Nok. At that moment, Han Sun Nok was holding me in his arms, protecting me in a large cloak of his brother. I was so scared that I didn't dare to move. His eyes were bloodshot, and he wiped the blood off my face with one hand. Although his expression was gloomy and frightening, his voice gently called my name. A bow, it's okay, don't be afraid. The matter was investigated clearly on the spot. The leader of the assassins who assassinated Han Shanyu was the Crown Prince of Chengwang Lu Qi, who was exiled from the capital to Gaoshan Road. That man in coarse cloth now no longer had any royal air. A knife was placed on his neck, and Han Tran stepped on him, unable to move. He stared at Han Shanyu with hatred, and cursed continuously, "You beast! Since your grandfather died, you have colluded with the eunuch surnamed Chau, committed many evil deeds, and will certainly not have a good ending." That year, I was 12 years old, no longer an innocent child. I know that in that distant capital, beside the emperor there is a most favored eunuch, named Tu Hai. People call him Tu Thien Tuesday. The emperor ascended the throne at the age of 9, and is now 21 years old, but he has become more and more absurd, foolish, and cruel. Old Tan Vong was once a great minister who was entrusted by the late emperor with the important responsibility of assisting the emperor, and together with a number of other great ministers, he wholeheartedly assisted him, but in the end, he was unable to prevent the appearance of treasonous ministers and eunuchs. Finally, 4 years ago, he was accused of treason and died in prison. The women in the royal palace were brought into the palace as slaves, while men like the crown prince Tan Vong were exiled to Sao Sun Dao. Sao Sun Dao has many mountains and forests. The crown prince was chased to Tan Sa Tu to live a life no different from the fishermen on the island, fishing every day to make a living, working every day in the shallow sea near the shore, digging for pearls in exchange for food. For the fishermen of Sao Sun Dao, such a life is normal. Everyone is born to live like this, so there is nothing to complain about. However, for them, this life is too difficult. They think this is a suffering, a crime, a punishment more painful than death. Especially when the crown prince heard that the head of the Han family, Han Sun Quan, greatly respected Tu Thien Tuesday in the capital. The rare treasures he secretly offered to Tu Thien Tuesday were many times more exquisite than the tributes offered to the emperor. It is rumored that in Tu Thien Tuesday's mansion there is a night pearl presented by Han Sun Quan himself. As long as there was that pearl, at night there was no need to light a lamp. Within 100 steps, even a hair on the ground could be seen clearly. Such a treasure was kept by a eunuch as his own. Not only that, Han Shanjin also fulfilled all the requests of that eunuch surnamed Chau, willingly becoming a hunting dog for him thousands of miles away. And the one who had falsely accused the old King Cheng of treason, causing the royal palace to fall apart, was that eunuch surnamed Chau. The crown prince of Cheng was exiled to Gaoshan Road, unable to kill that eunuch surnamed Chau, but he took this opportunity to sacrifice the seed to kill that eunuch's dog. He hated it so much that he wished he could swallow Han Shanyu alive. Yet Han Shanyu, looking down at him from above, suddenly smiled. I have never seen him like this before. His eyes were both contemptuous and pitiful, and also carried a vague mockery. He coldly snorted. Although the crown prince was exiled to our Gaoshan Dao, his heroic spirit has not changed at all, truly making people admire him. I respect my father very much. When I was young I often heard my grandfather mention him, knowing that he is devoted to the people, absolutely loyal, a good and upright official. Han Shanyu looked at the crown prince Cheng Wang. His words suddenly changed. He smiled and said, "But even so what? He can't even protect himself. How can he protect our Gaoshan Dao? When the old prince was alive, he could protect the people of the capital, and save his life for the people of the world, But when the emperor wanted to rebuild Michuan, he abolished the memorial about the pearl disaster. Other than admonishing him to death, what other way do you have? No need for Gaoshan Dao pearls, no need for anything from the Han family. You are all devoted to the people, to the country. Your righteous spirit is majestic, it really moves people. But the crown prince, don't forget, the one who finally made the emperor give up that idea, was a eunuch. No matter how he can cover the sky with one hand in the capital, falsely accuse loyal people, but as the saying goes, 10 miles of wind, 1,000 miles of filth. Gaoshan Dao is called a desolate land by you. A place where miasma and poisonous insects are rampant. A place used to exile criminals. You have only been here for 3 years and you can't stand it. Have you ever thought about how we common people and fishermen will live here for generations after generations? Han Shanyu asked the crown prince of King Cheng, each word as sharp as a knife. The crown prince was so angry that his eyes were about to split open, still loudly cursing. Don't use the common people as an excuse. You and that eunuch, the other one, is no different, enjoying a life of wealth and luxury alone, yet deliberately lowering the price of pearls, forcing people to go to the sea to dig for pearls for you. You always talk about morality and righteousness, but have you ever cared about their life and death? The Han family raises its head without shame before the heavens, lowers its head without shame before the earth. Why do I need to explain to you? The prince has already seen what he wanted to see, so let's end it here. Whatever happens will be beneficial to me. You don't understand this principle, you really deserve to die. After the assassination at Tan Sa Temple, the defenses of the Han Palace became even more strict than before. I have been by Han Sun Nok's side for 5 years. Up to this point I still think that on the surface he seems aloof, treating others a bit harshly, but in fact he is very compassionate. In my eyes, he is a gentle person. But that day, when leaving Tan Sa Temple, Han Tran asked him how he would deal with the crown prince of Tan. At that time, we were preparing to leave the island. Han Sun Nok looked straight ahead, not even glancing away, only coldly uttering one word, kill. Han Tran hesitated a bit, then said to him, he is the crown prince of Tan Palace, the old prince is no longer here. I didn't know that fourth uncle was so kind. Don't you realize that he is deliberately inciting the people on Qingsha Temple Island, sowing disaster for our Han family? Han Shanyu turned his head, coldly glancing at Han Tran. Because he is the crown prince of King Cheng, and dares to say such words, he must be killed all the more. Han Tran didn't say anything more, perhaps he himself understood. With Lu Qi's hatred for the Han family, if he were still alive, it would be difficult to guarantee that he wouldn't cause more trouble in the future. In this world, the most trustworthy people are the dead. After thinking it through, Han Tran sighed, clenched the sword in his hand, turned around and left. Han Shanyu looked at his back, coldly sneered. Only good at acting rashly, stupid mind, how can I hand over the Han family to him? When he said these words, his face was extremely gloomy, unable to hide his disappointment. I looked at him stupidly, suddenly realizing that, in fact, I have never understood him very well. At the age of 15, he became the head of the Han family. After the death of Elder Gao, without spending a single soldier, he was still able to control all the large and small pearl fields in Gaoshan Dao, not giving the people in the court a chance to interfere. This is not something that ordinary people can do. The real Han Shanyu, his mind is deep and unpredictable, he is both gentle and heartless, compassionate and cruel. However, the gloomy expression on his face only flashed and disappeared. He turned to look at me, his eyes quickly became gentle again, and he gently stroked my face. Little fool, if something like this happens in the future, don't rush out in front of me. If the Han family's guards can't protect me, then they are useless. I must have been scared. On the way back, the boat glided on the sea. I was no longer as happy as when I arrived, but instead was tired and threw up. Jia Nun was a bit worried, knowing that I couldn't eat anything, so she went down to the kitchen under the boat's hold and used ginseng and deer antler to make soup. A moment later, the candlelight flickered. I was half asleep when I heard someone calling my name. Opening my eyes, it turned out to be Han Shanyu. He sat upright by the bed, holding a bowl of ginseng soup, his eyes filled with laughter as he looked at me. Still feeling uncomfortable? Drink some ginseng soup and then go back to sleep. He personally fed me, afraid that the hot soup would burn me, so he brought it spoon by spoon to his mouth and blew on it to cool it down before feeding me. After feeding me half a bowl of ginseng soup, Han Shanyu reached out and used a handkerchief to wipe the sweat off my forehead. After midnight, he was always by my side taking care of me, until I lay down to sleep. I still unconsciously held his hand. Han Jun, I know you are a good person, Prince Cheng is also a good person. If it wasn't for the other way around, I wouldn't have ordered him to be killed. My voice was a little hoarse. Han Shan Yu smiled. He touched my head, his eyes gentle. A bow. The one who killed him was his father. What does it have to do with me? Why do you say it's the old prince? I was confused. Prince Cheng accepted the late emperor's entrustment to assist the young emperor, but when he discovered that this child was not a wise king, he still gave him a chance to consolidate his power. Han Shan Yu smiled slightly. I have brought gold, silver, and jewels to his mansion, wanting to offer all my wealth. If he wanted to rebel, he could have acted early. But that stupid and loyal person is ridiculous, so stupid that it is indescribable. In the end, he still wanted to risk his life to advise. The entire Cheng Wangfu family was killed by him long ago. No one can be blamed. People are born to live in shackles. If they don't even have the will to struggle, then they have to accept defeat, let others kill them. Han Shan Yu can always use a light tone. Ji casually told me profound principles. He said that I don't care what kind of person Tooth-Thin Tuesday is, the mountains are high and the roads are long. Cao Sun Dao cannot manage the affairs of the capital. Greedy people are always easier to deal with than those who are not greedy. The big boat sailed out to sea. I held Han Sun Nok's hand, then fell asleep without realizing it. Returning to Han Mansion, life returned to its previous peaceful state. A Tan still cleaned our small courtyard every day. In the summer, I accidentally fell asleep on the chair under the tree. She would sit next to me, carefully fanning me. In my free time, I still like to find Jia Nun, using bamboo poles to catch cicadas with her, and in the spring, picking flowers to make lipstick. I was already a girl who loved beauty, loved to wear new clothes made by a Tan, and apply lipstick made by Jia Nun on my face. I became a laughing man, chattering nonstop, always having a lot of stories to tell. During the autumn equinox, Jia Niang wanted to brew osmanthus wine. Every time the young guard brought the spring water from the mountain, I would ask curiously, "Is it the spring water from Luofu Mountain? Did you go into the mountain to get the water yourself? Are there miasma and poisonous insects in the mountain? Have you encountered them? Is it dangerous?" The young guard had thick eyebrows and bright eyes. His name was Yun Zhou. Yun Zhou was the one who brought the water no matter what, and I gradually became close to him. It was just that he blushed very easily, and after a few sentences he hurriedly left. I asked Jia Niang, "Why does he keep blushing?" I didn't ask him how old he was, or if he had a wife or children. Jia Niang was amused by me and couldn't hold back her laughter any longer. At the hour of the sheep, I often went to the study in Hufeng Inn to look for Han Shanyu. Among the hundreds of guests, there were often knights coming and going. If he was talking to someone else, I would quietly leave. A Shin and Jia Niang both had their own things to do. When no one was with me, I would lie on the bed and read a book alone. Every time like this, I felt extremely grateful to Han Shan Yu. If it weren't for him teaching me how to read and writing and forcing me to study hard, I would have missed out on a lot of the joy of reading scripts in my life. I liked all kinds of scripts, and after reading them, I would enthusiastically tell them to Han Shan Yu. I told her the story of the fox repaying kindness, the story of Lu Sheng dreaming of a life of wealth, the story of the monk and the scholar staying on the boat for the night. Every time Han Shan Yu finished listening, she would smile at me. There were few good scripts in the Han family's mansion, only a few were repeated. When I flipped through them many times, she asked the mansion's manager to buy me new scripts. The person sent to buy books was illiterate, and he bought any good book he heard the bookstore owner say. Then later, among the books I bought, I saw a book called Zan Dang Duyan. At first, I was only surprised, but the more I read, the redder my face became, my heart beat like thunder, and I was extremely scared. I quickly realized that this was an obscene book, corrupting good customs and traditions, and should have been torn up. But I was really curious, and wanted to read it once before tearing it up. Afraid that a Tan would find out, I hid it under the mattress, secretly leaning over to read it. Even after I finished reading it and burned it in a charcoal stove, a Tan still hadn't discovered it. This matter just like that became a secret buried in my heart, and when I thought about it, I was terrified. As the days passed, until the day I wore the hairpin, Han Shan Yu even deliberately held a grand ceremony for me. That day was very lively. A Shin tied all my hair up and then used a hairpin to secure it. I wore a formal dress with a hairpin, a dignified embroidered dress. There were many people in the mansion attending, even Han Tran, the fourth master of Han, was present. Ever since he punctured my left eardrum, making me half deaf, I had always been afraid of him. That year, When we were sacrificing the sea at Tansa Temple, I saw him on the island and instinctively hid behind Han Sun Nok. After the sea sacrificial ceremony, he started to occasionally return to Han Mansion. Every time he came to Tong Chin Duong, he would meet me a few times. Perhaps Han Sun Nok had told him so. After seeing me, he would quickly avoid me. Before the hairpin ceremony, Han Shanyu said to me, "Fourth uncle said he wants to come back to attend your hairpin ceremony. Are you willing to let him come? If you don't want to, he will send someone to bring the gift. If you don't need it, I will have someone throw it away on the road." Han Shanyu was asking for my opinion. He had always been cold towards Han Tran. There was no intention of defending him in his words. When I was 8 years old, Han Tran punctured one of my ears. If I said I never complained, I'm afraid no one would believe me. But I really don't resent him. I know that he often traveled between Qingsha Temple and other places, guarding the jade farm for the Han family, diving into the water with a group of brothers to find pearls, going through life and death. Their feelings were very deep. The blood pearl that my father took away that year took the lives of many of them. He had a reason to hate us, but I had no reason to resent him. It was my father who was wrong first. My life was due to stealing. This cannot be denied. Han Shan Yu said he is a rude man. This year is 27 years old, still unmarried, only devoted to guarding the pearl farm. I am afraid of him, but absolutely do not blame him. On the day of the hairpin ceremony, Han Tran came very early. The gift he gave me was a wind chime made of pearl shell. The kind of wind chime hanging in the corridor that can predict the direction of the wind. Those pearl shells are colorful, under the sunlight reflecting sparkling, extremely beautiful. I like it very much. Look at him and softly say, "Thank you, fourth uncle." Compared to 7 years ago, Han Tran has changed a lot. He still has a handsome face with thick eyebrows, bright eyes, but he has added a thick beard, looking very free and carefree. Faced with my thanks, he seemed embarrassed. It was a long time later that I heard people say that not long after piercing my ear, he regretted it. At that time, he was filled with resentment, lost his mind. When he pressed me down on the table, he instinctively thought that I would resist. Unfortunately, I did not resist. The 2 silver needles just pierced my ears. Every time he got drunk, he would angrily ask that skinny old man back then, why didn't he stop him? How could he just watch him attack such a little girl? Han Tran was not a bad person. He acted recklessly, but he valued love and loyalty. The act of piercing a child's eardrum had become an unspeakable nightmare for him. Actually, he was also very afraid of meeting me, because he always remembered the way I looked at him back then, obedient and quiet. From the day of this hairpin ceremony, the grudge between me and him was considered to have been erased. He gave me a wind chime. I cautiously thanked my fourth uncle. He seemed very embarrassed. Just saying that he liked it was fine. After the hairpin ceremony, one day I asked Han Shan Yu, "When will we get married?" In the study, I rested my chin on my hand and looked at him, one hand holding a brush drawing a picture of flowers and birds. My smile was bright. He put down the book, looked at me, his eyes deep. "Abao wants to get married?" "Yes, I have wanted to marry young Master Han for a long time." I looked into his eyes. The smile on my face gradually became shy, my cheeks flushed. Han Shan Yu did not answer my question, just smiled slightly, then leaned over to look at the picture of flowers and birds I was drawing. "Abao finished drawing?" "Not yet, I still haven't drawn the sparrow's tail. Young Master Han, please help me." Han Shan Yu smiled in response, reaching out to take the brush from my hand. He attentively sketched the bird's tail. My eyes followed the strokes of the brush and then fell on his slender hand, finally tilting my head slightly, looking up at his handsome face. Han Shan Yu was 8 years older than me. When we first met, that handsome young man already had a calm and mature temperament. Now he was even more calm and unpredictable. His eyes were long and curved, and when they slightly raised, they contained a bit of dignity and sharpness. His lips were thin and his features were elegant, but his lips were pale. In front of the pear flower wood desk, he stood beside me. When he bent down, the smell of ink mixed with a faint, cool fragrance wafted towards the tip of my nose. I don't know when, but every time I was near him, my heart would beat faster, and my cheeks would uncontrollably turn red. If I got too close, I would feel even more confused. I actually had thoughts about him that I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have read that spring departure, which made my spring heart start to flutter, and I couldn't control my desires, only wanting to get close and hug him. He smelled so good, his lips must also smell so good, very suitable for kissing. When he caressed my face, The green jade ring on his finger rubbed against my face, making my heart itch. Ah Bao, what are you thinking? After that, I was absent-minded in front of him again. When I came back to my senses, Han Shan Yu had already put down his pen. He looked at me blankly, his eyebrows slightly furrowed. Why is your face so red? Are you not feeling well? After he finished speaking, he put his hand on my forehead. His eyes were concerned, his deep pupils were staring at me like that. In this moment, not only was there a deer running wild in my heart, that deer seemed to have broken out of the siege, rushing straight out. The hand placed on my forehead was very cold, but it ignited a fire for no reason, making my throat dry and trembling. Although Han Shan Yu was distant from others, he had always pampered me. I had never been afraid of him. So, I grabbed the hand that was on my forehead. For the first time unable to control myself, I moved closer and hugged him, bringing my lips close. As expected, his lips were definitely very fragrant and kissable. I was both nervous and excited. The desire in my heart was satisfied, the more I wanted more. I passionately kissed him, wrapping my arms around his neck. Han Shan Yu seemed to be in a daze. He stood there in a daze, his body trembling, not coming back to his senses for a long time. He didn't know what to do, letting me do whatever I wanted. When he saw me absorbed in kissing him, his legs couldn't stand firmly, and he instinctively held my waist. We just hugged and kissed like that in front of that pear blossom wood desk. After a long time he pushed me away. He gently said, opened his eyes, the corners of his eyes were red, his lips finally had a blood color, his voice trembled. Ah Bao. I once again pressed close to him, hugged his waist, looked into his eyes, his face flushed red and said, I long for young Master Han, I miss you every day, I miss you even more at night. Han Shan Yu's originally cold face finally couldn't keep calm. He angrily said, who taught you these things? I have never lied before, so I told him the story of Zan Dang Duyan. I also read him the poems in the book. The poems described the passionate love scene, the skin intertwined. I have never seen Han Shan Yu so angry. He even seemed panicked. His voice was both angry and urgent. Damn it. His words of, damn it, caused the housekeeper and the servant who bought the script to receive a beating that they would never forget. The day they were beaten, I hurriedly pulled Han Shan Yu's sleeve and said, young Master Han, what does this have to do with them? Why did you beat them? Han Shan Yu coldly turned the ring on his finger, ignoring me. I knelt down in front of him and looked up at him. I originally wanted to marry you. What's wrong with loving you? They did buy the script, but the one who kissed you was me. I was moved by you and couldn't control myself. If you're angry, just punish me. I looked at him with a sincere, earnest expression and a pleading gaze. Han Shan Yu pursed his lips and didn't say anything. I didn't know why his ears were red. In the end, before the steward and servants were beaten to the end, he flicked his sleeve and left. From that day on, I didn't see Han Shan Yu for a long time. I knew where he was, but every time I went to look for him, there were guards who stopped me, saying that the family head was busy and couldn't see anyone. Several times in a row like that, I understood that he didn't want to see me. I asked Atan in frustration. I didn't do anything wrong. I was originally going to marry him. Why is he angry with me? Atan didn't speak clearly, and didn't dare to speak carelessly, only said, the Lord is probably in a bad mood, it will be fine after a while. I went to find Jia Niang, wanting to complain to her. But during that time, I didn't know what Jia Niang was busy with. I was always nowhere to be seen. Even if I did see her, she would be absent-minded when I spoke. I felt like she had more on her mind than I did. After that, I didn't go to find Jia Niang anymore. I stayed alone in my room, sad and depressed, not wanting to eat or drink. After half a month of silence, Atan said that I had lost a lot of weight. I was determined that I couldn't continue like this, and once again mustered up my courage, intending to go find Han Shan Yu. Who would have thought that this time there would be no obstruction? He agreed to see me. His expression was gentle, his eyes were soft, as if he had forgotten the unpleasant events of the past, but his words left me speechless. He wanted to choose a fiancé for me, to marry me to someone else. The 300 guests of the Han family, as many as knights, could freely give me the choice. I came back to my senses and said, I don't want to marry anyone else, to leave young Master Han. He smiled, not caring. It's okay, after getting married, I can still live in the Han family. But, you are my fiancé. That doesn't matter, a bow. There are countless men in this world, I'm not necessarily the right person for you. I will choose a better man for you, there will definitely be someone you like. There are countless men in this world, but I only love you. Silly, you grew up in the Han family since you were young, naturally you will rely on me. That is not a love between a man and a woman. I'm afraid you have misunderstood it as love. A bow, from now on, consider me as your elder brother. I will prepare a dowry for you, so that you can marry in glory. Young Master Han once said, "You are my future fiancé. Have you never loved me? I only have brotherly feelings for you, not love between a man and a woman." You lied to me. I raised my head to look at him, my heart filled with anger. If you don't like me, why did you say it now? I don't believe you. Han Shanyu frowned slightly, his eyes looking at me coldly. Whether you believe me or not, I don't care at all. I am the head of the Han family. I ordered you to get married. You just have to wait to get married. I will only marry you. If you don't agree, I will shave my head and become a nun. After saying that, I angrily lifted my skirt, stood up and ran away. After returning, I had no appetite for several days, and started to hide in my room in a daze. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got, the more I felt uncomfortable. Ironically, it seemed that Han Shanyu had made up his mind. He no longer cared about me. It seemed like he really didn't care about me anymore. I was angry. One quiet afternoon, I quietly brought a pack of dry food, avoided Ah Shin, and secretly ran to hide under the bed in Han Shanyu's bedroom. I wanted to know if he found out that I had disappeared, would he be worried, regretful for wanting to choose another fiancé for me? I wanted to prove that he also liked me, liked her, and that was important. Mind me, but I never expected that it would be that night that I discovered a shocking secret. Han Shanyu was a woman. The night fell, the candlelight in the room flickered. The woman was wearing a white Chinese dress, just finished bathing, her long hair like a waterfall, wet and loose to her waist. She did not bind her chest, the lines of her clothes were clearly visible. Her face was exactly like Han Shanyu, her eyebrows like distant mountains dotted with powder, her skin as white as frost. At this moment she was calmly leaning on the bed reading a book. After flipping through 2 pages, she seemed a little tired. She started to tilt her head back and close her eyes, not moving. I covered my mouth and looked at her through the gap in the screen, not moving either. Not long after, someone knocked loudly on the door. The person who entered was Jia Niang. She lowered her head, slowly walked over, presented the white jade box with both hands, and knelt down in front of Han Shanyu. Han Shanyu did not open her eyes, saying one sentence, "Put it down." Jia Niang obediently placed the jade box beside the bed, but did not leave, still maintaining her kneeling position. After a long while, Han Shanyu opened her eyes. She sat up straight, looked at Jia Niang who was kneeling on the ground, reached out a hand, and grabbed her chin. "Jia Niang is useless, there is no need to beg me. You and I grew up together since we were young, I treat you differently, but if you confront me because of a spy, don't blame me for not respecting our past." Jia Niang's eyes were filled with tears, she grabbed her hand, and continuously shook her head. Han Shanyu closed her eyes, and let go, back off. Her voice was cold and indifferent. Jia Niang's tears rolled down her face, and finally she obediently kowtowed and turned around to leave. I lay prone under the bed, still terrified that Han Shanyu was a woman, not daring to make a sound. The room was quiet without a sound, only she was left. The candlelight flickered, sometimes bright, sometimes dark, shining on her face. Her expression was extremely pale, not showing any emotions or ripples. Then, she picked up the white jade box that Jia Niang had placed beside the bed. Inside was a blue pearl, emitting a dim light. The blue color was like flowing water, like a living thing. I stared at that pearl, suddenly remembering what my father had told me when I was young. Pearls have 8 grades. The best type is the dang pearl. The light is dazzling. The outer edge is like gold, placed in a dark room can replace candlelight. It is a rare treasure in the world. The second type is Qingzu, also known as living pearl, although it is not as beautiful as Dongju, nor as bright as Dongju, but it is as rare as Dongju, because Qingzu has a strange effect, put in the mouth of a dead person, can preserve the body intact, not rotting for 1,000 years. The legendary red pearl only exists in myths. But Dongju and Qingzu are real treasures, although there are many people who have never seen them in their entire life. I guess that is Qingzu, because after Han Shanyu took it out, he put that pearl, neither big nor small, in his mouth. Under her fair skin, a layer of green light began to appear. That light slowly spread across her face, across her bare neck, line by line, and finally returned to normal. Her eyelashes were as long as crow wings, covering her eyes that had a dark green tint. She seemed to be in great pain, holding her chest, kneeling down ground, brows furrowed, cold sweat pouring down his forehead.